Hello, Lab Out Loud listeners. If you like the show, please consider supporting the show through our Patreon page. For as low as $1 a month, you can help support the show. Go to laboutloud.com/support to get started today. And now, on with today's show. You're listening to Lab Out Loud, Science for the Classroom and Beyond. I'm your co-host, Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartel.
And this is a look-back episode of Lab Out Loud where we're actually going back to the time when U.S. stamps were 39 cents.
39 cents.
Do you know what they are now?
Over 50, right?
60 cents. They're 60 cents. So we are going
I was
back,
right.
Yeah, we're going back 16 years to a guest that we first talked to on our original show. He's here with us right now, Dr. Kenneth Liebrecht. Welcome to the show, Dr. Liebrecht.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
Now, the last time we talked, it was the issue of that U.S. postage stamp that kind of inspired us to reach out. But you are a professor of physics at Caltech, and is that still the case now?
Oh, yeah.
And you, as part of your work, have studied ice crystals, which kind of parlayed maybe right into snowcrystals.com, your personal website, correct?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I sort of got into this from the science end of looking how crystals grow and then started doing ice and snowflake photography. And, the whole thing just snowballed, as they say.
Oh, very nice.
One thing we didn't talk about on our interview, the very first interview with you, was like a little bit of your history. Like, how did you get to this phase of study in your career? Like, what was your little bit of your career path? Were you always into physics, even in like high school? Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Well, sure. I mean, I grew up in North Dakota, so I've seen a few snowflakes before, but I never really had any interest in snowflakes. If the snow fell, that was all I knew. And I got into physics in high school and went to Caltech and ended up as a professor of Caltech doing mostly astrophysics, variety of things. And just one day, for no reason at all, I just started thinking about how crystals grow and just the physics of how molecules arrange themselves into these regular lattices and just how that works. And then patterns form when crystals grow. Like snowflakes. And I just started thinking about the physics of all that and pretty quickly sort of came to ice as a really interesting kind of case study. There's lots and lots of crystals in the world, but ice is easy and cheap. And we all know what snowflakes kind of look like. Yeah. So I started reading about it just for fun. And I discovered that just a lot of kind of fascinating phenomena happened when snow crystals grow, and people have observed these things and just didn't understand them very well. And so I started just poking at it and making measurements in the lab. Then I got into snowflake photography for a while, even though I live in Southern California. So I would go to Canada and photograph snowflakes. And that led to the stamps, a set of 4 stamps in 2006. That was cool.
Sure.
And I've done a lot more snowflake photography since then. And now I actually grow my own snowflakes in the lab and I photograph them. And so I can make what I call designer snowflakes and movies of growing snowflakes and all that kind of stuff.
So have you had any snow epiphanies in the last decade and a half?
Well, sure, a lot has happened in all that time. I've done a lot with the science and trying to understand how snowflakes work. One of the puzzles, which has been a puzzle for like 75 years, was just why snowflakes are thin and flat, flat plates of ice, because they're not always thin and flat. Sometimes they're columnar, like wooden pencils, hexagonal wooden pencils. And people have sort of noticed that in the 1930s, and it had never really figured it out. And I'm sort of thinking I've figured it out now. After a long time, it's really, the physics is pretty complicated for how ice crystals grow. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
You may have noticed, obviously, that the technology has changed. As we were listening to our first episode,
oh my gosh,
we noticed our first
technology
episode
changed. We sound like children, Brian. in that.
Well,
It's
I mean,
so
that
long
was
ago. Apparently your voice
that was
changes
a
as you get
teenager
older.
ago, if you think about the age.
So
and
true.
Our technology has improved. We've gotten much better microphones. We've gotten better computers and better software and better internet for that matter too.
Yeah.
But you've probably experienced that as well. And could you speak a little bit more to like what's the technology like now that you didn't have in 2006?
Well, a lot of the camera technologies improved by leaps and bounds. I started doing photography, Snowflake photography, with digital cameras when they were pretty new and really expensive.
Yeah.
And now, of course, you can do things with your phone that you couldn't even do with expensive cameras back in the day. And
Right.
And mostly that has helped a lot. I mean, a lot of everything has gotten cheaper. I do a lot with refrigerating and just optics, and most of those things have just gotten cheaper and easier. And so it sort of allows, and of course, computer technology, you can really take a lot of data and analyze it now. So all that helps.
Mm-hmm.
I was fortuitous the other day. I was dropping my kids off to school, and it was kind of a flurrying day, and we had low temperatures, probably about 7 to 12 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was perfect weather for catching snowflakes if that's what you were wanting to do. And we had, I was headed to school, but my son forgot his Chromebook, so I had to run back and get it. And I thought, I bet you I could get some decent pictures of this with my macro lens. So I threw on the macro lens on a DSLR, and I was very happy with the results. And again, something you probably couldn't have done as easily, 16 years ago. Just the fact that, yes, I had to have the right lens for it, but, the image, it's a one-to-one image for the most part. And so, yes, you can zoom in, but you're not really magnifying the image, but you can zoom in significantly. And so I got some really nice pictures. And then I ran one through a background removal tool, just an online tool, and with a little bit of extra editing, I have a nice, like, transparent snowflake image that would have been much harder to get, again, 15, 16 years ago.
They're really beautiful. I saw them. I was impressed.
Here,
Brian.
let me see. I can see if I can drop some in the chat here.
Oh, yeah.
For you, and we'll, because I'm pretty proud of them.
Yeah, I'm impressed. While Brian's doing that, what do you think is the biggest thing that might have learned since we last talked?
Well, a lot of it was just this business of the crystals change so much with temperature. When the crystals grow just below freezing, you get plate-like crystals, and when it's a little colder, they're columnar, and when they're colder still, it's plates, and then colder again, columns. And so, I mean, you don't see this when you go outside so much because you don't really know the temperature of the clouds. But when they grow them in the lab, that's very distinctive. You just change the temperature, and the character of the growth changes really dramatically.
Oh, I see. So you can basically just dial it in to what?
Yeah, that picture you took of this sort of a stellar, what's called a stellar dendrite, your classic holiday snowflake. That's not the only kind of snowflake that grows. They tend to grow only when the temperature's around 5 or 10 degrees Fahrenheit. That's really the temperature they grow at. At other temperatures, you get different kinds of snowflakes, and people have documented this for a long time. And but it was hard to understand why. And so I worked on that. I tried to understand, what's going on at the molecular level. And that's where the science comes in. The molecular level, what's really causing the growth to change with temperature.
I see.
And I figured a lot of that out. So I'm kind of pleased about that, because that puzzled me for 20 years. And
and in 2006, you mentioned that temperature and humidity were the biggest factors in the way that the crystals would form. Is that still the case, or is there another factor in there?
Oh, no, it's mostly that. But it's just hard to understand why. So
out of the three that Brian shared, we have a snowflake that kind of has on a black background, one that's maybe looks sort of like a blue background, and then kind of one that is, I guess, transparent, Brian? That's
the same thing as the one on the blue background with the image with the background removed.
So looking at the first two snowflakes, do you see anything significant about those two? Are they? Well, I suppose they were both created in kind of the similar conditions, so they should be similar. Is my understanding of that correct?
I didn't see those go by. I saw one go by.
No, there should be 3 in there.
There should be 3.
I don't see any now.
No, well, let me see if I can. I'll send them one at a time here in the chat. So here's one. And, the funny thing is I was out helping to supervise recess at the time. And so I would take the opportunity to anything that I could find. I took some off of the backs of some children, and when you see up close on their clothing, you're like, ew. The one on the black background is actually a dumpster cover. And
it is.
The one on the blue background is a car.
Okay.
And so you had to get it perfect because there were points where if the car was dark and facing the sun, as soon as the snowflake landed, it would immediately, melt away. And so I had to find like the cool shade sided there, and it was just fascinating. It was just, and this was prep work for me because later on that day I was selected to read to a 2nd grade class, and I usually choose Snowflake Bentley, and I like the science kind of piece behind that. And so I was able to show my snowflakes to the students at the same time, and they were amazed. So this was fortuitous. It was homework for the podcast and for school.
That one with the black background seems to have like more of a, like it has 3 spines going across it, more defined, as opposed to the other one where it doesn't seem to have that kind of infrastructure there. Am I the only one seeing that? Dr. Liebrecht, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, those are all stellar crystals, and they do have a lot of detailed structures that are different. But you can get a lot more different than that just from like you can see columnar crystals. Like these are hexagonal plates, and imagine like I said, wooden pencils. Those are common as well, and
those can be. We could find those in nature and take pictures of those.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So there's 2 things I would like to address. One thing is if you look at the blue one, there's like a little bubble in the bottom. And one of my friends noticed this when I posted it online, is that there's a reflection of me taking the picture in on the picture itself. So that's kind of a fun piece there, and we'll share that online. But we read some books about how snowflakes form, and then the students were amazed to hear that the snowflakes could be made from particles that are in the atmosphere, whether it's dirt or salt or even bacteria there. And so one student raised her hand and she said, so does that mean that snow isn't clean enough to eat?
Well,
and she was thinking, the bacteria and the dirt stuff there. And then someone else said, well, don't eat the yellow snow, of course. But, when we think about snow being pure, is that something we should also think about, like what's at the center of it, or is it too small that it really doesn't impact?
No, it's very small. It's mostly just dust. Here are some more unusual ones I'm posting now.
Oh, wow. Now, okay. If I would describe these look like a syringe with the plunger on both ends.
Or a spool of thread without the thread.
I call them like wheels on an axle.
Oh, yeah. Or a spool, an empty spool.
An empty spool, yeah. And these are actually pretty easy to find if you go looking for them. I mean, I grew up in North Dakota. I never saw anything like this until I knew they existed. And then I would go outside, and now I see them all the time. You just have to be on the lookout for them. And so you can see 12-branch snowflakes. I just put one of those up, and triangular snowflakes.
That. Triangular. Now, how does that happen?
Well, this is another thing. Triangular snowflakes were documented first about 150 years ago, and they're not that hard to find. You got to go looking for them. I've seen plenty over the years, and you don't see them all the time, and they tend to be small, so you need a microscope to really see them. They're not just going to jump out at you on your sleeve like these big plate-like crystals, the big stellar crystals. These are all like these tiny ones. These are tiny, like a millimeter in size. So, but again, people have seen triangular snowflakes for years, for decades. And again, nobody really knew how that worked. And so I kind of figured that out too. There's just a certain mechanism for growing these, and it only happens at a very narrow temperature range and a very narrow humidity range. And I can reproduce this in the lab. So I can make it so I can make triangular snowflakes almost 100% of the time. If I dial up the conditions right. So I think I understand how they grow now because I can make them in the lab. And
repeatability.
Yeah, once you have a theory and the theory says, look here and this should happen, and then you do and it happens. And so it's like, well, now I think I know what I'm talking about. So it's fun to grow these crystals in the lab and try to understand them. And then when you develop theories, you can grow more and try to really sort of close the loop.
Yeah.
I do a lot of that. I mean, especially I live in Southern California, so it doesn't snow. I make my own snow.
So I guess I had notions back when we talked in 2006 that I would work with my classes to do some of this, and the timing just never worked out. Like it never was snowing at the right time to be able to do it with my classes. And you would think that, and maybe this is on me, I didn't make the time to do it that way, because in where we live, since we've talked, we've had at least 850 inches of snow. So Dale estimated like 200 inches of snow, but we've had some years we've had, over 100 inches of snow, and we're well on our way there with this snowstorm coming up in the next few days ourselves. But and it was only yesterday that I got really good images. I have tried myself to do, having a microscope slide out, catching snowflakes, and then trying to freeze them permanently in place with like crazy glue. But I never really got the results that I wanted. And not yesterday, but a couple days ago when I captured these snowflakes here was really where I felt like, oh, I finally have it. And this was after we've contacted you, and so I was like, oh, this is it. This is it. What suggestions do you have if you have students or teachers that would like to try this in their classrooms or at home?
Where are you photographing these, by the way? Where are you getting all this snow?
Wisconsin.
Oh, Wisconsin has excellent snow crystals. So, one of the hard parts about photographing snowflakes is that you don't always get good snowflakes. And it depends on where you live. As I like to say, Miami is a terrible place.
Location.
Yeah. Wisconsin has excellent snowflakes. Vermont has excellent snowflakes. Alaska. But other places, not so much. Like New York, it is fine, except it's not very cold. The really nice snowflakes happen when it's really cold, like say around 5 or 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's pretty cold.
Yeah.
So most people, if they want to photograph snowflakes, they'll go out when it's just a few degrees below freezing. And, well, everything melts and the crystals aren't very good and there's nothing to photograph and it gets very discouraging. So that's just one of the problems. Photographing snowflakes is the first thing you have to do is find some good snowflakes. But once you have some good snowflakes falling around you, they're not hard to photograph. You need a macro lens of some kind. And just if you get a magnifier, you can see without photographing, you can see quite a bit. Just a cheap magnifying lens is a lot of fun to look at the kinds of crystals. I tend to use a microscope, and that gives me some of the really small ones, and those are fun to look at too. Mm-hmm. And the small ones is where you get a lot of these really exotic looking crystals. They're maybe 1 or 2 millimeters in size.
So they're smaller, so that would probably contribute to the reason why we have the traditional image of a snowflake in our mind as the ones we have on stamps and things like that. And the other ones are just smaller, or are they less frequent also?
Well, a lot of them are very frequent, but they're small. They're not very clean looking. Those big stellar plates they just jump out at you.
Okay. So they're larger and they're more kind of recognizable because
there's some history there too. Wilson Bentley was the first person to photograph snowflakes in the 1880s, and
how do you do
he
that
selected
in the 1880s?
The technology was brand new then. Photography was brand new, and it was quite a struggle. He would get a handful of good pictures every winter, and he did it for 50 years.
And it cost him their family like a herd of oxen or something like that, if I remember my story correctly from the other day. So It was significantly more expensive.
Well, yeah, he was using glass plates, and but he published all these. But he always picked out the really nice, beautiful stellar crystals. When you're spending a lot of money per plate, you want to get the best crystals. So he published these, and the book is mostly big stellar plates. And so people naturally thought that all snowflakes look like that. But when you really look
snowflake
carefully,
bias.
You very much biased. But other people have sort of looked at it in a more systematic way. And the first thing you find when you look systematically is like 99.9% of the snowflakes are just not very attractive at all. And just because they don't grow very well, they get beat up in the wind, they collide.
Sure.
So it's just they're all messed up. So you finding these really nice, clean snowflakes is hard. So
I'm going to send you another one because this was an example of what I went through. So again, Snowflake Bentley talks about if you want to take pictures of snowflakes or if you want to look at snowflakes, have a dark background. So I reminded the students that you want to do that. One of the snowflakes that I captured was not on a dark background, but one of the hardest things I found was that because, these are three-dimensional structures and sometimes they would be kind of tilted up or bent, it was really hard to focus on just one plane of snowflake without it looking fuzzy. And so this one, though, and again, we'll share this with the listeners here on the show notes, it's actually standing up. So it's pretty striking, even though this was an exceptionally salty car as a background.
I like that. That looks like a North Pole hood ornament there.
A lot of the nice ones, if you want to look at them, you get like a black wool scarf or something.
Oh, sure.
And that gives you a very nice background. But yeah, if you have a big snowflake and you want to get the light to reflect off it in just a nice way, you have to tilt them a little bit. And so then they're out of focus. And you can't do much about that, except the sort of tried and true method by real snowflake photographers is to take 50 or 100 frames and each one focused in a slightly different plane and then combine them all together into one image. It's a huge amount of work.
It was interesting because the students asked, does he have the world record for taking the most pictures of snowflakes? And I said, well, he may have at one time if that had been counted, but I'm pretty sure one snowflake photographer might take more pictures in a session today than all of Snowflake Bentley's career in that sense, and that it just the way that the technology works.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, now you just hold the button.
Do you have, as someone who studies snowflakes, like snowflake pet peeves? Like, the things you hear, I'm like, oh, they're, like.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, my pet peeve is 8-sided snowflakes.
Oh,
because they don't happen.
They don't happen. That's right.
So we can do 12.
My second graders could have told you that because they knew 6 sides always.
Well, not that triangle.
Well, the triangle's a little different. That's a little different. And there are 12 branch snowflakes too, but those are just
multiples of 6, basically.
Collided together. So
right.
Whoa.
So one of my claims to fame is the movie Frozen. They called me up as the snowflake consultant.
Oh, really?
Do you have business cards for that?
Snowflake consultant.
No, I was in the credits after like 20 minutes of everybody else being listed. But
really?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's definitely something that's changed since then. Yeah.
This is the first time I think that we have anyone who's starred in a Disney film.
Well, starred is played a very small role.
I mean, it's an animation, so you're in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it was funny. It was a good story because I was just sitting in my office minding my own business, and somebody calls and it's somebody. So I'm from Disney Studios, and we're working on a movie, and it involves snowflakes, but I can't tell you anything about it. It's all top secret.
Yeah.
And but we want to get the snowflakes right, and so we would like to talk to you. And so I went down to Disney Studios, and I just went and told them that, whatever you do, don't make any snowflakes 8-sided or 5-sided or anything like that. They got to be 6-sided. Everyone, 6. Just 6. Keep that number in mind, 6. And they did. They made like every snowflakes was 6-sided. All of the ice structures in the movie had that hexagonal symmetry. And I was very pleased. They really did a wonderful job.
Well, that's good.
Well, that's awesome. The DC universe I've heard is, comics is rebooting, and I believe there's a Mr. Freeze. Maybe there'll be another phone call coming up in the next couple of years.
I asked the producer, like, why do you want to get the snowflakes, so accurate? And he said, we've been doing the Disney magic for decades, and they found that the audience won't buy it if it's not some sort of realistic.
Yeah.
And so, as he said, it's okay to conjure up snowflakes out of your fingertips. That's fine, but they have to be real snowflakes. They can't be something that doesn't exist.
Yeah, that you only get. I think I can't remember the guest we had on who talks about like comic book physics and things like that. And you're supposed to get one, physics exemption. Basically, you get one thing. Like you can stop a bullet or something. Like you have your one power. You can't just keep adding them.
That's right. And once you throw time travel in, then it just gets completely messed up.
Yeah,
I believe they call that nuking the fridge. Is that that the phrase?
God.
Well, Dr. Liebrecht, thank you so much for your time. Before we let you go, do you have any, you have some special projects coming up, or do you have like a magic, I really got to solve this problem about snowflakes before I die kind of a thing?
Well, my big project.
What's your holy grail of snow here?
Yeah.
Well, I got my holy grail, which was to understand the growth and why they're plates and columns. So I was pleased, and I wrote a book, a big sort of science book on snowflakes. That was my magnus opus, and so that was kind of cool. So I don't know what I'm working on now. I did the triangular snowflakes. Something always comes up. I'm not quite sure what I'm.
A couple things caught my eye were you did not have video of the snowflakes growing on the website snowcrystals.com. By the way, all your books and photos and things like that. So these are great gifts. These because you have like big sort of big photographs in these books and things like that for you to get that. But the video of the time lapse of them growing, that is new and we haven't seen.
Some of that's on the website too.
Yeah, we saw that. That's on there. And then under science, there's there. And then another thing that I caught my eye was the, in quotes, identical twin snowflakes. So I think that was new.
Yeah.
What
that was, and we always have the saying that no two snowflakes are alike. And so, so when I was making them, I found that I really could make two that looked very, very similar. And so that was amusing.
So I get a sense you're never going to stop.
Well, there's always something coming down the road.
Is there a different area of study that you've gone? They say down the rabbit hole here for. You've definitely done that for snowflakes. Is there other areas that we don't know about that you study?
Well, I do a little of this and a little of that. I've done things with ion traps, and I do a lot of physics teaching in the lab, and some electronics, just a little of this, a little of that.
Never a bored day, it sounds like.
No, science is good that way. There's always more to do, just like podcasts.
There's always more people to talk to, right?
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate catching up with you. 16 years later, maybe we waited a little too long. Apologies for that. We're going through our catalog and finding things, but I think this was a great time. It was very pleasurable for us to just kind of look back at what's been out there, and then just the opportunity with Brian here to take these pictures and us having technology now I feel like I'm closer to it Like, you opened the door, and now some of these tools have allowed us, like, more and more people to get there. I think it's really kind of fascinating.
Oh, and Brian's got some great photos. Those are not only great photos, but excellent snowflakes.
Well, thank you much. We try to make the best snow around here, but we're coming up to a blizzard-like condition, so there will be opportunities in our area very shortly.
Yep, 'tis the season, they say. Well, thank you so much for again joining us and talking. This was wonderful.
Very good. Thanks for having me.